For more analysis, joining us live is Simon Jackman. He's the CEO of the US Studies Centre. Simon, finally, justice for a victim of police brutality. We really can't underestimate just how significant this is for America.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the United States a long time ago, and one of my formative experiences as a student in the US was the Rodney King trial in Los Angeles and the aftermath of that. And a lot of us at the US Studies Centre have been exchanging our experiences. Would this be the case where finally a jury would find a police officer guilty in the unlawful death of a black citizen after a long line of cases where that wasn't the case? And it turned out today that the answer was yes. And that's a big, big step for the United States when you think of the history of these cases over the last, say, 20 to 30 years in particular. But I think importantly for an Australian audience, the long, centuries-long struggle America has had with race, and hence the significance of today, that liberty and justice for all, as guaranteed under the US Constitution, those words came to life today. And moreover, I think we're in a new age too, where the availability of technology like cell phones that can take a 9-minute, 29-second long video can go out across the world, and the world can see what those eyewitnesses saw in Minneapolis, and I think that's a game changer as well. The other reflection I'll share off the top is just what Joe Biden said, and it was echoed by Kamala Harris and, of course, by America's first African-American president, that as significant as today is, in their view, and many people, many Democrats and many people that voted for Joe Biden believe this as well, this is the first step in a long march, and a long ongoing march to racial justice, and hence we get to the political implications of this. There's tremendous pressure on the Democrats in Congress, while they've got a Democratic president, for the time being at least, have control of both houses of Congress. Can there be a significant legislative step to help ensure that deaths like George Floyd arise far less often, and indeed never happen in the United States? And that's a lot of pressure, both on the left, to really bring that to life now, to capitalise on the breakthrough that many see today as being, up against, I think, a lot of Democrats who represent moderate districts, where the appetite for this issue, perhaps, while everybody concedes it's a pressing issue, perhaps taking big steps and certainly not going anywhere near defund the police, but what exactly might that step be that can win a majority of support in both the Senate and the House of Representatives?
Simon, we're seeing live pictures coming in from Minneapolis. There seems to be a real sense of relief when you listen to the people there in that city that this was the outcome. There were real fears that if the verdict had gone the other way, Minneapolis was ready to explode, essentially.
Oh, look, absolutely. And not just Minneapolis, by the way. It wouldn't have just been Minneapolis. The entire country, indeed the entire world, has been paying attention to this. And just go back to last summer. Look at what, in the United States, look at what the death of George Floyd prompted. In the middle of a pandemic, hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans took to the streets. Indeed, it had inspired Black Lives Matter protests here in Australia and around the world. It wouldn't have just been Minneapolis that might have seen violence on the streets. And I think there's a lot of small business owners who had boarded up their businesses that are perhaps breathing a sigh of relief that they can pull those hoardings down now and get back to work and get back to business. But that, no doubt, that was a huge element of this. And you know, to be honest, you know, I think we're all on tenterhooks for a moment this morning.
So while I've got you, I'm keen for your thoughts on the Virtual Climate Summit coming up over the next few days. Just how much pressure will there be on Australia to do more on the issue of climate change? Joe Biden's made his position pretty clear.
Yeah, look, our assessment at the US Studies Centre, we've talked a lot about this. I think there is so much going on in the alliance agenda at the moment between Australia and the United States, particularly when it comes to China, particularly when it comes to the Quad, and so many fronts in that, but from cybersecurity to public health to infrastructure provision to combating foreign interference. You go down the very full and growing alliance agenda at the moment. I don't see US officials publicly calling out Australia. I think there will be calls to do more. And I think, remarks like John Kerry, that aside he made in his TED talk with Al Gore about we haven't always been on the same page with Australia, that's about as much as you're going to get, I think, out of the US, who I think will be looking at Scott Morrison's recent language of, gently edging towards more receptivity of a net zero target. They will see that process underway in Australia as well and understand leave well enough alone. That overt pressure from the United States on Australia would actually be counterproductive. And indeed, we've got public opinion research out at the US Studies Centre that shows you tell Australia that they need to get on board with what the rest of the world are doing. It doesn't help, right? Australians don't particularly respond to that. I think what Australians will respond to is seeing concrete action in the United States. For instance, Biden has a $175 billion proposal to support the electric vehicle industry in the United States, everything from the production of EVs to charging stations. When Australians see that and see perhaps a United States that only 5 years from now to 10 years from now might be 20, 30, 40% EVs, that's when I think the pressure, quote unquote, comes. It'll be much more bottom up. And as Biden likes to say, it's the power of the example the United States sets rather than the example of the application of American power. And I think climate change vis-a-vis Australia, the US, look for those sorts of avenues of influence on Australia rather than anything overt government to government.
Simon Jackman, appreciate your analysis.